I stood in the rain, my suitcase soaking through, as my son locked the door behind me. His wife smiled from the window. I was 68 years old, homeless, and alone. But what I discovered next changed everything. Before we start, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories. My name is Margaret Thompson, and for 68 years, I believed that family was everything. That blood was thicker than water, that the love between a mother and her child was unbreakable. I was wrong about all of it. But let me tell you how I got here, standing in the rain with nowhere to go, and how I learned that sometimes the strongest thing you can do is walk away from the people you love most. I raised my son Daniel as a single mother after my husband Thomas died in a construction accident when Daniel was only 5 years old. I can still remember that little boy crying at his father's funeral, holding onto my dress, asking when Daddy was coming home. I held him close and promised him that everything would be okay, that I would take care of him, that he would never want for anything. I kept that promise, even when it cost me everything. For the next 18 years, I worked myself to the bone. I cleaned offices at night, my knees aching as I scrubbed floors in empty corporate buildings. During the day, I worked as a seamstress in a small alteration shop, my fingers cramping from endless stitches and hems. On weekends, I took on extra jobs, catering events, babysitting other people's children. I never remarried. Every man who showed interest, I politely turned away. Daniel was my priority. Daniel was my world. I was the kind of mother who packed extra sandwiches in his lunchbox because I knew he would share with the kids who had less. I stayed up until 2 in the morning helping him build science fair projects and memorize vocabulary words, even when my eyes burned with exhaustion and my alarm would ring in 4 hours. I saved every spare dollar, hiding cash in envelopes labeled with his dreams, college fund. First car, wedding day. When Daniel graduated high school with honors, I cried tears of joy. When he got accepted to the state university, I handed him an envelope with $15,000 inside. His face went pale. "Mom, this is your savings, your retirement. This is my investment," I told him, "in your future, in our future." I believed that. I truly did. After college, Daniel met Jessica. She was beautiful, ambitious, and confident. At their wedding, which I helped pay for, I welcomed her into our family with open arms. I told her she was the daughter I never had. I meant it. 5 years ago, when they bought their first house, they came to me with a proposition. They needed help with the mortgage. Would I consider moving in with them? They had a basement room I could use. It would be perfect. We could be a family again. I said yes, without hesitation. I gave them $20,000 as a housewarming gift to help with renovations. I moved into that basement room and turned it into my little sanctuary. I thought I was building a future with my family. I thought I was home. I had no idea I was moving into a prison that would eventually throw me out into the rain with nothing but a suitcase and a broken heart. For the first few years living with Daniel and Jessica, life felt almost perfect. I had convinced myself that this was exactly where I was meant to be. Every morning, I would wake up at 6 o'clock sharp, even before my alarm went off. It was a habit from decades of early shifts, and my body refused to sleep past dawn, even when I had nowhere urgent to be. I would climb the basement stairs quietly, careful not to wake them, and start my day in their kitchen. My kitchen, I used to think. Our kitchen. I would put on a pot of coffee, the rich aroma filling the house like a warm invitation to the new day. While it brewed, I would prepare breakfast. Daniel loved scrambled eggs with cheese and toast. Jessica preferred yogurt with fresh berries and granola. I made both every single morning, setting their places at the table with folded napkins and a small vase of flowers from the garden. By 7:30, they would come downstairs, still groggy and half asleep. Daniel would kiss my cheek and mumble, "Morning, Mom," before reaching for his coffee. Jessica would smile and thank me for breakfast, scrolling through her phone while she ate. These small moments felt sacred to me. I was needed. I was useful. I was part of their lives. After they left for work, I would spend the next 2 hours cleaning. I scrubbed their bathrooms until the fixtures gleamed. I vacuumed every room, moving furniture to get underneath. I did their laundry, separating whites from colors, folding everything with hospital corners and precision. Jessica's delicate blouses were hand-washed and hung to dry. Daniel's work shirts were ironed and placed on hangers in his closet, organized by color. I never asked them to notice. I just wanted everything to be perfect for them. Around noon, I would go grocery shopping. I knew their favorites by heart. Daniel loved pot roast with carrots and potatoes, just like I used to make when he was a boy. Jessica preferred lighter meals, salads with grilled chicken, pasta primavera. I bought ingredients for both, carefully checking prices and using coupons to stretch my pension as far as possible. Every month, I gave them $800 in cash for my share of the bills. They always thanked me and said it helped so much. In the afternoons, I would work in the garden. That garden was my pride and joy. I had transformed their bare backyard into something beautiful. Roses climbed the fence, their red and pink blooms bright against the white pickets. I planted tomatoes, zucchini, basil, and thyme. There was a small bench under the oak tree where I would sit with my iced tea and watch the birds. Those quiet hours were my therapy, my meditation. By 5 o'clock, I would be back in the kitchen preparing dinner. The table would be set. The house would smell like home. When they walked through the door, tired from work, everything would be ready. We would sit together and eat. Daniel would tell me about his projects at the engineering firm. Jessica would complain about her difficult boss. I would listen, offering advice when asked, staying quiet when not. On weekends, we would sometimes watch movies together in the living room. Daniel would fall asleep on the couch, his head on a pillow, just like when he was a little boy. I would cover him with a blanket and smile. This was my life. This was my purpose. I was happy. I should have known it was too good to last. It started on a Tuesday evening in late February. I remember because I had just planted the first seeds of the season in small pots on the kitchen windowsill, tomatoes and peppers that would be ready to transplant in a few weeks. I was rinsing my hands at the sink when Jessica came home from work. She walked right past me without her usual greeting, her phone pressed to her ear, her voice low and urgent. She disappeared into the garage. I could hear the muffled sound of her voice through the door, but I could not make out the words. It lasted about 10 minutes. When she came back inside, her face was flushed and her jaw was tight. She saw me standing there and forced a smile that did not reach her eyes. "Everything okay, sweetheart?" I asked, drying my hands on a dish towel. "Fine," she said quickly. Too quickly. "Just work stuff. You know how it is." But I had heard her take work calls before. They never sounded like that. That tone was different, strained, almost angry. I wanted to ask more, but something in her expression told me not to push. So I just nodded and went back to preparing dinner. That night at the table, the air felt different, heavier. Daniel came home late, apologizing about traffic, but he seemed distracted. He barely touched his meatloaf, which was unusual because it was his favorite. Jessica pushed her food around her plate, checking her phone every few minutes. I tried to make conversation. I asked about their days, told them about a funny thing that happened at the grocery store. They responded with one-word answers and polite nods. It felt like I was talking to strangers. After dinner, I was loading the dishwasher when I heard them in the living room. Their voices were hushed but urgent. I turned off the water to reduce the noise and listened. I told myself I was not eavesdropping. I was just concerned. Something was clearly wrong. "We need to talk about this seriously," Jessica said. Her voice had that same tight quality from earlier. I know," Daniel replied. "But now is not the time. We need to think it through." "We have been thinking it through for weeks. We need to make a decision. Can we please just not do this right now?" Then silence. I heard footsteps, approaching and quickly turned the water back on, my heart hammering in my chest. Jessica walked into the kitchen, grabbed a bottle of wine from the rack, and walked out without looking at me. Daniel followed moments later, his face unreadable. I finished the dishes with trembling hands. What were they talking about? What decision? Why did it feel like it involved me? I tried to push the thoughts away, but they clung to me like cobwebs. That night, lying in my basement room, I stared at the ceiling and listened to the muffled sounds of their footsteps above me. I heard their bedroom door close. I heard the television turn on and then off. I heard everything and nothing at the same time. I told myself I was being paranoid, overly sensitive. They were young and had their own lives, their own problems. It probably had nothing to do with me. Marriages had private moments. That was normal, healthy even. But deep in my gut, something felt wrong. Something had shifted, and I could not shake the feeling that the ground beneath me was starting to crack. The next morning, I woke up determined to forget about the previous night. I convinced myself that I had overreacted, that my imagination had run wild over nothing. Young couples argued. They had stress. They had private matters that did not concern me. I was reading too much into a few whispered conversations and tense dinners. I made myself a cup of tea and sat at the small table in my basement room, giving myself a stern talking to. You are being a foolish old woman, I thought. You are looking for problems where there are none. They have been nothing but kind to you, giving you a place to live, including you and their family. Stop being so needy and suspicious. I decided the best course of action was to be even more helpful, even more invisible. If they were stressed, I would make their lives easier. I would be the perfect houseguest, so useful and unobtrusive that they would never have reason to be unhappy with me. That day, I deep cleaned the entire house. I scrubbed the grout in the bathroom tiles with a toothbrush until my knuckles ached. I organized the pantry, throwing out expired items and arranging everything by category. I washed all the windows inside and out, standing on a stepladder despite my fear of heights. I even cleaned out the garage, sweeping the floor and organizing their tools in storage boxes. When Jessica came home that evening, I was in the kitchen preparing her favorite meal, lemon herb chicken with roasted vegetables and wild rice. I had set the table with the good china, the set I had given them as a wedding present. I even lit candles. "What's all this?" Jessica asked, looking around at the spotless house. "I just thought we could have a nice family dinner," I said, smiling brightly. "I know you both have been working so hard. You deserve something special." She stared at me for a long moment, her expression unreadable. "You didn't have to do all this, Margaret." The way she said my name instead of calling me Mom, like she used to made something twist in my stomach. But I pushed the feeling away. "I wanted to," I said. "You are my family." She nodded slowly and went upstairs to change. When Daniel arrived, we sat down to eat. I asked them about their days, complimented Jessica's new haircut, told Daniel how proud I was of his recent promotion. I worked hard to fill the silences, to make everything feel normal and warm. They were polite. They thanked me for dinner, but there was a distance in their eyes that I could not bridge, no matter how hard I tried. Over the next week, I continued my campaign of helpfulness. I did extra loads of laundry. I baked cookies and left them on the counter. I weeded the garden beds until my back screamed in protest. I smiled constantly, even when they barely acknowledged me. At night, alone in my room, doubts would creep in. But I would push them down, suffocate them with rationalizations. They are just busy. They are just tired. Marriage is hard at their age. I am just being sensitive because I am alone and old. I called my sister Linda one afternoon and told her everything was wonderful. She asked if I was sure, if I was happy. I laughed and said, "Of course. Why would I not be? I had a roof over my head and family around me. What more could I want?" But when I hung up the phone, I sat in the silence of my basement room and wondered why I felt like I was lying. It was a Thursday afternoon, 2 weeks after I had started my campaign of being the perfect houseguest. I was in the laundry room doing my daily routine, sorting through the hamper with practiced efficiency. Whites in one pile, colors in another, delicates set aside for hand washing. The washing machine hummed its familiar rhythm as I worked. I picked up Daniel's khaki work pants and checked the pockets, something I had done 1,000 times over the years. He had always been careless about leaving things in his pockets: receipts, loose change, chapstick that would ruin an entire load if it went through the wash. It was such a mundane maternal habit that I did it without thinking. My fingers touched paper. I pulled out a folded document intending to just set it on the counter with the other items I had collected: some coins, a grocery receipt, a business card. But something about the letterhead caught my eye. It was heavy paper, official looking, with a law firm's name embossed at the top: Morrison and Associates, attorneys at law. I should have just set it down. It was not my business. It was probably something related to work or taxes. But my hands unfolded it almost of their own accord. My reading glasses were upstairs, so I had to squint at the small print. The words came into focus slowly, like a photograph developing in a darkroom. Consultation agreement, eviction services, residential tenant removal. My heart began to pound. I scanned down the page, my hands starting to tremble. There were notes scribbled in the on margins in Daniel's handwriting. I recognized his messy scrawl immediately. Month-to-month tenant, one note said. No formal lease agreement, said another. And then, circled 3 times in red pen, my name, Margaret Thompson. The room tilted. I grabbed the edge of the washing machine to steady myself. This could not be what it looked like. There had to be another explanation. Maybe they were consulting about a rental property. Maybe this was for someone else. Maybe I was misunderstanding. But then I saw the date at the top. It was from 3 weeks ago, right around the time the whispered conversations had started, right around the time everything had begun to feel wrong. I read the document again, more carefully this time, hoping I had missed something that would make this make sense. But the language was clear and clinical. The lawyer had outlined the legal process for evicting a family member who'd been living in a home without a formal lease. It explained that a 30-day notice would be sufficient. It listed the steps they would need to take. It even included a fee estimate. My legs gave out, and I sank to the cold tile floor, still holding the paper. The washing machine continued its cycle, agitating and spinning, completely indifferent to the fact that my world was collapsing around me. They were planning to evict me. My son and his wife were consulting with lawyers about how to legally throw me out of their house, out of what I had believed was my home. How long had they been planning this? Weeks? Months? Had they been discussing it while I cooked their meals? While I cleaned their house? While I smiled and tried so hard to make everything perfect? I sat on that laundry room floor for almost an hour, the paper clutched in my shaking hands, trying to process what I had discovered. Eventually, I carefully refolded it and placed it back in Daniel's pocket exactly as I had found it. My hands moved on autopilot as I finished the laundry, but everything had changed. The evidence was real, and I could no longer pretend that everything was fine. The eviction notice came on a Monday morning. I had just finished making breakfast, scrambled eggs and toast arranged carefully on their plates, when Daniel came down the stairs. He was dressed for work, his tie slightly crooked, but he was not looking at me. His face was flushed red, and he held a white envelope in his hand. Jessica followed right behind him, her arms crossed over her chest, her expression cold and set. She positioned herself slightly behind Daniel, like a general sending a soldier into battle. My stomach dropped. I knew. Before he even opened his mouth, I knew. "Mom," Daniel said, his voice strained. He still would not meet my eyes. "We need to talk." I gripped the edge of the kitchen counter, my knuckles turning white. "What is it?" He held out the envelope. His hand was shaking slightly. "We need you to leave. You have 30 days. The words hung in the air like poison. I took the envelope with numb fingers and pulled out the paper inside. Official letterhead, legal language, notice of termination of tenancy. my name typed in cold, impersonal print. What? My voice came out as barely a whisper. Why? Did I do something wrong? Please, just tell me what I did. Jessica stepped forward, her jaw tight. Margaret, you belong in the past. This is our house, our life, our future. We need our space. You are suffocating us with your old-fashioned ways and your constant hovering. We cannot breathe with you here. Each word was a knife. But I pay rent, I said, my voice breaking. I help with everything. I cook, I clean, I try to stay out of your way. I thought we were family. I thought this was my home too. Daniel finally looked at me, and what I saw in his eyes was worse than anger. It was indifference. The money you give us barely covers the utilities, Mom. It is not enough. And frankly, we are tired of taking care of you. You are a burden. We have our own lives to live. A burden. That word landed like a physical blow. I had raised this man. I had worked 3 jobs to put him through college. I had given him my life savings for this very house. I had sacrificed everything I had for him, and I was a burden. Where will I go? I asked, hating how small and desperate my voice sounded. I am 68 years old. I do not have much money saved. This is my home. That is not our problem, Jessica said flatly. You are an adult. Figure it out. You have 30 days. That is more than generous. Daniel, please. I reached for my son's hand. Please talk to me. This is your mother. Does not that mean anything to you? He pulled his hand away. It means I gave you a place to live for 5 years. It means I have done my duty. But now it is time for you to go. We want to start our own family, and we need the space. We need privacy. We need a life without you in it. The finality in his voice shattered something inside me. Jessica picked up her purse and headed toward the door. 30 days, Margaret. Do not make this difficult. They left for work, leaving me standing in the kitchen with the eviction notice in my trembling hands and their untouched breakfast growing cold on the table. That night, I could not sleep. I lay in my basement bed staring at the ceiling, listening to the sounds of the house above me. The eviction notice sat on my nightstand like a death sentence. My mind raced with questions that had no good answers. Where would I go? How would I afford rent somewhere else? Would I end up in a state-run facility for indigent seniors? Around 11 o'clock, I heard their bedroom door close upstairs. I heard the muffled sound of the television. Then voices. They were talking, and the words were drifting down through the heating vent in my ceiling. I had never noticed before how sound carried through that old ductwork. I should have put my pillow over my head. I should have turned on my own television to drown them out. But something made me stay still and listen. Once she is out, we can finally rent out that basement for real money. Jessica's voice came through clearly. I have already looked into it. We can get at least $1,500 a month, maybe more. That is almost double what she was giving us. My breath caught in my throat. What about her pension checks? Daniel asked. She has been depositing them into our joint account for the bill payments. Ice flooded my veins. A year ago, when I had that health scare and spent 3 days in the hospital, Daniel had convinced me to add him to my bank account. He said it would make it easier to pay my share of the household bills. He said it would help if I ever had an emergency and could not access my money. I had trusted him completely. We keep whatever is in there now, Jessica said, her voice matter of fact, like she was discussing what to have for dinner. She signed those papers making you her power of attorney, remember? When she was in the hospital? Technically, we can access everything. That feels wrong, Daniel said, but his voice was weak, uncertain. It is smart, Jessica replied firmly. Think about it. She is old. She probably only has a few years left anyway. We wait about 6 months after she leaves. Then we petition the court for guardianship. We tell them she is senile, that she cannot manage her own affairs. We have documentation that she was living with us because she could not take care of herself. The court will give us control. Control of what? Daniel asked. Everything. Her Social Security, her pension, any savings she has not told us about. And here's the best part, that life insurance policy from your father's death. She is still the beneficiary, and it is worth about $80,000. Once we have guardianship, we control all her assets. We can put her in a state facility and the money stays with us. My hand flew to my mouth to stifle a gasp. They were not just evicting me. They were planning to rob me, to take control of everything I had, to lock me away in some facility and steal my entire life. What if she fights it? Daniel asked. She will not, Jessica said confidently. She is too old, too trusting, and too afraid. By the time she figures out what is happening, it will be too late. We will have legal control, and there is nothing she can do about it. I heard Daniel sigh. Not a sigh of disagreement, a sigh of resignation, of acceptance. Okay, he said quietly. We do it your way. I rolled onto my side and pulled my knees to my chest, biting my pillow to keep from screaming. This was not just betrayal. This was calculated theft. This was evil, and I had walked right into their trap. I did not go upstairs the next morning. I could not face them. I could not pretend to be okay. I stayed in my basement room with the door locked, curled up on my bed, and for the first time in decades, I let myself completely fall apart. The sobs came from somewhere deep inside. Me, a place I had kept locked away since Thomas died. They were not quiet, dignified tears. They were raw, choking sounds that hurt my chest and made my whole body shake. I buried my face in my pillow so they would not hear me above, even though part of me wanted them to hear, wanted them to know what they had done. I cried for hours. Every time I thought I had no tears left, another wave would crash over me and I would start again. I looked around my small basement room through blurred vision. The photographs on my dresser mocked me with their lies. Daniel as a baby, his toothless smile so pure and innocent. Daniel on his first day of school, holding my hand and looking up at me like I was his whole world. Daniel at his college graduation, his arm around me, both of us beaming with pride. When had that boy disappeared? When had he turned into a man who could throw his own mother away like garbage? I thought about all the years. The memories played in my mind like a cruel slideshow. Working the night shift at the office building, my knees aching as I pushed the industrial vacuum cleaner down endless hallways. Coming home at dawn to make his breakfast before he woke up. Falling asleep in a chair while helping him with homework because I had been awake for 20 hours straight. I remembered the times I went without. The winter I wore a coat with a broken zipper because I used the money for his new winter jacket instead. The years I ate pasta and canned vegetables for dinner so he could have fresh meat and fruit. The birthday when I told him I did not want anything because I was too old for gifts, when the truth was I had spent my last $40 on the video game system he desperately wanted. I had given him everything, my youth, my health, my savings. My entire life had been built around making sure he had opportunities I never had. And this was my payment. Eviction. Theft. A plan to declare me incompetent and lock me away. The worst part was not the plan itself. It was Daniel's weakness. If Jessica was the mastermind, Daniel was the coward who went along with it. The son I raised would have protected me. The boy who used to hold my hand and promise to take care of me when I got old would have said no. That boy was gone. Maybe he had never really existed. Maybe I had invented him in my own mind, projecting my hopes onto a child who grew up to be a stranger. I picked up the photograph of Thomas from my nightstand. My late husband's kind eyes stared back at me. I am so sorry, I whispered to his image. I failed. I raised a man who would do this to his own mother. I am so sorry. The isolation was crushing. I had no other children. My parents were long dead. Most of my friends had passed or moved away. Linda was in Ohio, too far to help. I was truly alone in this world, betrayed by the only family I had left. That afternoon, something inside me went quiet. The tears stopped. I sat up in bed and looked at myself in the mirror across the room. My eyes were swollen. My face was blotchy and aged. I looked like a broken old woman. But somewhere beneath that broken surface, something else was stirring, something cold and clear and angry. I woke up the next morning at dawn with a strange clarity I had not felt in weeks. My eyes were still puffy from crying, and my head ached from dehydration, but my mind was sharp. Crystal clear, something fundamental had shifted inside me during the night. I sat up in bed and looked around my small basement room with new eyes. This was not my home. It never had been. I had been a tenant, a servant, a convenient source of income, and free labor. But I was done being those things. I was done being a victim. If Daniel and Jessica wanted to treat me like a stranger, like an adversary, then that is exactly what I would become. No more cooking their meals, no more cleaning their house, no more pretending we were a happy family. They had made their choice, and now I would make mine. But I would not just roll over and let them destroy me. I would not make this easy. I got dressed with purpose, pulling on my most comfortable clothes like armor. Then I made a list. I was good at lists. Lists had gotten me through raising a child alone, working multiple jobs, managing a household on nothing. Lists would get me through this too. First item, protect my money. I waited until I heard them leave for work, their car engines fading down the street. Then I climbed the stairs and called my bank from the kitchen phone. My hands were steady as I dialed. I need to remove someone from my account, I told the representative. My voice was calm, controlled. My son. I need him removed immediately, and I need to open a new account that only I have access to. The woman on the phone was kind and efficient. She asked if everything was okay. I told her the truth. No, but it will be. Within an hour, I had a new account. I transferred every penny I had left. It was not much. They had already taken most of it over the past year through various emergencies, and loans I now realized were never meant to be repaid. But what remained was mine, and they would not touch another cent. Second item, call Linda. My sister answered on the third ring, and when I told her everything, the eviction, the overheard conversation, the plan to steal my money, she was furious. "You come here right now," she demanded. "Today. Pack your things and come to Ohio." "Not yet," I said. "I am not running away. Not until I make this right." "Margaret, what are you planning?" "I do not know yet," I admitted, "but I am not leaving until they understand what they have done." Third item, legal advice. I found a free consultation with an elder law attorney through the senior center. Her name was Patricia Hoffman, and when I sat in her office that afternoon and told her my story, her expression grew darker with every sentence. "What they are planning is elder abuse," she said bluntly. "Financial exploitation. Both are crimes in this state. But we need evidence. Can you prove any of this?" "I heard them talking," I said. "That is not enough. You need recordings, documentation, proof." I nodded slowly. "Then I will get proof." That evening, I went to the electronics store and bought a small digital voice recorder. It was $60 I could not really afford to spend, but it was an investment in my future, in my justice. As I walked back to the house, I could no longer think of it as home. I felt something I had not felt in months. Power, control, hope. They had made a terrible mistake. They thought I was weak, helpless, easy to discard. They were about to learn how wrong they were. For the next 2 weeks, I became a ghost in my own home. I stopped cooking their meals. I stopped cleaning their house. I stopped doing their laundry. The breakfast table sat empty each morning, dishes piled up in the sink, dust gathered on surfaces I used to keep spotless. They barely noticed. In fact, they seemed relieved. Jessica started ordering takeout for dinner. Daniel stopped saying good morning when he passed me in the hallway. We existed in the same house like strangers in a hotel, and that suited me perfectly. Because while they thought I was sulking in defeat, I was working, Every conversation they had, I recorded. The voice recorder stayed in my pocket constantly, always on, always listening. I captured everything. Jessica complaining about how long it was taking to get me out. Daniel discussing which furniture from the basement they could sell once I was gone. Their casual conversations about my pension money, about the rental income, about their timeline for the guardianship petition. I documented everything methodically. I made copies of bank statements showing the withdrawals they had made from our joint account before I closed it. I photographed the power of attorney papers they had pressured me to sign in the hospital. I kept the eviction notice in a folder along with the lawyer's consultation letter I had found in Daniel's pocket. I was building a case, piece by piece, like assembling a puzzle. But I did more than just gather evidence. I started reaching out. I called Adult Protective Services and filed a formal complaint. A caseworker named Maria Rodriguez was assigned to my case. She listened to my story and my recordings with a grave expression. "Mrs. Thompson, what they are doing is illegal. This is textbook elder financial abuse. We will open an investigation." I contacted a local news station that had an investigative segment about elder abuse. I sent them an email with my story, explaining that I was a mother who had sacrificed everything for her son, only to be betrayed and robbed. They responded within 24 hours. A producer named James wanted to interview me. We scheduled it for 2 weeks out, the day before my eviction deadline. I also reached out to my sister Linda with a question that had been nagging at me. "That property Mom and Dad left us in Ohio, is it still just sitting there?" "Actually," Linda said, "I have been meaning to talk to you about that. A developer contacted me last month. They want to buy it. They are offering $680,000 for the land. That would be $340,000 for each of us." I sat down hard on my bed. $340,000. Daniel and Jessica had no idea this property existed. I had never mentioned it because it had always just been vacant land, worthless as far as I knew. But now it was worth a fortune. "Let us sell it," I told Linda, "as fast as possible." "Are you sure?" "Absolutely. I am going to need that money. And Linda, do not tell anyone. Not yet." The pieces were falling into place. I had evidence. I had authorities investigating. I had media interest. And soon I would have financial independence they never knew existed. Every evening I would sit in my basement room and review my plan, check my recordings, organize my documents. I felt like a general preparing for battle, and in a way, I was. Daniel and Jessica thought they had won. They thought I was beaten, just counting down the days until they could throw me out and begin their theft. They had no idea what was coming. The property sale closed on a Friday afternoon. I sat in the title company's office with Linda on video call from Ohio, and we signed the documents electronically. $340,000 was deposited into my new bank account that same day. I stared at the balance on my phone screen, hardly believing it was real. But I told no one. The money would stay hidden for now, my secret weapon for when I needed it most. The next morning was Saturday, exactly 1 day before my eviction deadline. I woke up early and dressed carefully. A nice blouse, my good pants, the pearl necklace Thomas had given me on our 10th anniversary. I put on makeup for the first time in weeks, covering the dark circles under my eyes. If I was going to do this, I would do it with dignity. At 9 o'clock, right on schedule, I heard vehicles pull up outside. I looked out the small basement window and saw the news van. Channel 7 investigates. My heart pounded, but my hands were steady. The doorbell rang. I heard Daniel's footsteps above me, moving quickly toward the door. "Who the hell is here this early?" Jessica's voice called from the kitchen. I climbed the basement stairs and walked calmly to the front door. Daniel was already there, looking confused at the people on the porch through the window. A woman in a professional suit with a microphone, a man with a camera, a sound technician with equipment. "Mom, who is that?" Daniel turned to me, his face pale. "Just some visitors," I said calmly, reaching past him to open the door. The reporter extended her hand. "Mrs. Thompson, I am Jennifer Martinez from Channel 7. We spoke on the phone about your case. Yes, thank you for coming. Please come in. Wait, what? Daniel's voice rose. Mom, what is going on? Jessica appeared in the hallway, her hair still wet from the shower. What the hell is this? Jennifer smiled professionally. We are here to interview Mrs. Thompson about her case of elder abuse and financial exploitation. We've been investigating her allegations for the past 2 weeks. The color drained from Jessica's face. Daniel grabbed my arm. You called the news? Are you insane? I pulled my arm free and looked him in the eye. I called them because someone needs to know the truth about what you have done. Get out, Jessica hissed at the news crew. This is our house. You are trespassing. Actually, Jennifer said calmly, Mrs. Thompson is still a legal resident here until tomorrow. She has every right to have guests. Now, we can do this interview here or we can do it at the station. But we are doing it. I turned to the crew. Please set up in the living room. For the next hour, I sat on the couch and told my story. Every detail, the eviction, the stolen money, the plan to declare me incompetent, the overheard conversations. I showed them documents, I played recordings. My voice cracked at times, but I did not stop. Daniel and Jessica stood frozen in the hallway the entire time. They tried to interrupt twice, but Jennifer shut them down. You will have your chance to respond. Right now, we are listening to Mrs. Thompson. When I finished, Jennifer turned to them. Would you like to comment on these allegations? Jessica's face was red with rage. This is slander. That old woman is lying. She's manipulating you. We have recordings, Jennifer said evenly. Financial records, and legal experts who have reviewed the evidence. The story airs Monday night at 6. I left the house that afternoon. I packed my 2 suitcases with everything that mattered. Photographs, documents, my mother's jewelry, Thomas's wedding ring. I walked out the front door with my head high while Daniel and Jessica watched from the window, their faces twisted with anger and fear. But I did not go far. I checked into a modest hotel just 4 blocks away and waited. Monday evening arrived. At exactly 6 o'clock, I turned on Channel 7 News and watched my story air. They had titled it, Thrown Away a Mother's Story of Betrayal. The segment was 12 minutes long. They showed my interview, the documents, clips of the recordings with actors reading the transcripts. They even had legal experts explaining how this was textbook elder abuse. Within an hour, the story had been shared thousands of times on social media. By morning, it had gone viral. National news outlets picked it up. The comments section was filled with outrage. People calling Daniel and Jessica monsters. People sharing their own stories of elder abuse. People demanding justice. I watched it all from my hotel room with a strange sense of calm. Tuesday morning, my phone started ringing. Friends I had not heard from in years. People from church, former neighbors, the senior center director. Adult Protective Services updating me on their investigation. A victim's advocate offering support. Even a lawyer offering to represent me pro bono if I wanted to sue for the stolen money. But the call I was waiting for came at 11:30. Daniel. His voice was panicked, desperate. Mom, please, we need to talk. Can we come see you? I am at the Comfort Inn on Maple Street, I said calmly. Room 214. They arrived 20 minutes later. I watched through the peephole as they approached my door. Daniel's eyes were red and swollen. Jessica looked like she had aged 10 years overnight. They knocked softly, hesitantly. I opened the door. Mom, please. Daniel's voice cracked. He looked broken. We made a terrible mistake. We are so sorry. I do not know what we were thinking. Please forgive us. Jessica's mascara was smeared down her cheeks. Margaret, we need your help. Everything is falling apart. I let them in and closed the door behind them. They stood in the small hotel room looking lost and desperate. Jessica got fired yesterday, Daniel said, his words tumbling out. The news story was everywhere. Her boss saw it. They said they could not have someone like that representing their company. And my work, they called me in for a disciplinary meeting. Our friends won't answer our calls. Our neighbors are calling us monsters. We are getting hate mail. And the mortgage, Jessica added, her voice breaking. Without my income, we cannot make the payment. The bank is already threatening foreclosure. We are going to lose everything. Please, you have to help us. We need money just to get through this. Please. Daniel dropped to his knees in front of me, actually grabbed my hands. Mom, I am begging you. I know we were wrong. I know we hurt you, but please help us. We are your family. I looked down at him, then at Jessica, who was crying openly now. Come here, I said quietly. I want to show you something. I walked to the television and picked up my laptop. I mirrored the screen to the TV. My bank account filled the large display. The balance glowed in bright numbers. $340, $847.23. He stared at the screen. Jessica's mouth fell open. Daniel's grip on my hands went slack, and he sank back on his heels, his face going white. How? He whispered. That is the property my parents left to Linda and me, I said, my voice steady and calm. The land in Ohio you never knew about. A developer bought it 3 weeks ago. That is my half. $340,000. Daniel was still on his knees, staring at the screen like he was seeing a ghost. Jessica had gone completely silent, her tears frozen on her cheeks. I switched screens. And this is the email from my new apartment complex, a beautiful senior living community with a garden and a community center. I was approved last week. I move in next month. Another screen. This is the confirmation from Adult Protective Services. They have opened a formal investigation into both of you for elder financial abuse. Another. This is the police case number. Financial exploitation of an elderly person is a felony in this state. Another. This is my new lawyer's retainer agreement. Pro bono, by the way. Several attorneys offered after seeing the news story. I closed the laptop and looked at them both. Daniel was crying now, his face buried in his hands. Jessica was shaking, her arms wrapped around herself. You thought I was helpless, I said quietly. You thought I was weak, old, stupid, easy to throw away and rob. You planned to put me in a state facility and steal everything I had. You called me a burden. You said I belonged in the past. We were wrong, Daniel sobbed. We were so wrong. Please, Mom, I am your son. A son protects his mother, I said. A son honors the woman who sacrificed everything for him. You are not my son anymore. You are a stranger who stole from me and tried to destroy me. Jessica stepped forward, desperate. Please, Margaret, we will pay you back every penny. Just help us now, just this once. We will lose our house. We will lose everything. I looked at her coldly. Good, because I lost everything too. I lost my home. I lost my family. I lost my dignity. The only difference is I did not deserve it. You do. What about mercy? Daniel asked, his voice breaking. What about forgiveness? You raised me to be better than this. Does not that mean you should be better too? I am being better, I said. I am protecting myself. I am setting boundaries. I am showing you that actions have consequences. That is not cruelty. That is called self-respect. I walked to the door and opened it. Now get out, both of you. You are not my family anymore. You made that choice when you threw me away. Live with it. They left, broken and crying, but I felt no satisfaction. Only a deep, quiet peace. 3 months later, they lost the house to foreclosure. Jessica filed for divorce, citing Daniel's weakness and poor judgment. Daniel moved into a small studio apartment and took a second job as a night janitor. Ironic, considering that was one of the jobs I worked to raise him. The legal case resulted in probation and mandatory counseling for elder abuse. They were ordered to repay $23,000 they had stolen from my account, plus damages. As for me, I moved into my new apartment. It had a small balcony where I grew herbs and flowers. I started volunteering at a women's shelter, helping other women rebuild their lives after trauma. I traveled to Ohio twice to visit Linda. I even started dating a kind widower named Robert who I met at the community center book club. At 68 years old, my life began again, not despite what happened, but because of it. I had learned that it is never too late to stand up for yourself, never too late to choose dignity over convenience, never too late to start over. Sometimes the people you sacrifice everything for will be the ones who hurt you the most. That is not a lesson anyone wants to learn, but it is one I had to face. For 68 years, I believed that family was sacred, that blood was thicker than water, that the love between a parent and child was unbreakable. I learned the hard way that family is not defined by DNA. It is defined by respect, loyalty, and love that goes both ways. When my son and his wife threw me out of their house, they thought they were discarding a burden, an inconvenient old woman who had outlived her usefulness. They looked at me and saw nothing but an obstacle to their future, a drain on their resources, a relic of the past that needed to be removed. But that screen they saw in my hotel room told a different story. It showed them that I was not helpless. I was not stupid. I was not the broken victim they had created in their minds to justify their cruelty. I was a woman who had survived raising a child alone, who had worked herself to the bone, who had built a life from nothing. And I was fully capable of protecting myself when necessary. The money on that screen was not just about financial security. It was about independence, about dignity, about proving that their assessment of me was wrong. They thought I would have nowhere to go, that I would end up in some terrible facility begging for their help. Instead, I rebuilt my life better than it was before. Here's what I want you to understand. Being kind does not mean being weak. Being loving does not mean accepting abuse. Being family does not excuse betrayal. You can honor your parents and still set boundaries. You can love someone and still protect yourself from them. And sometimes, the greatest act of love is walking away and letting people face the natural consequences of their choices. My son learned that throwing away the person who loved him most was the biggest mistake of his life. Not because I punished him, but because he lost something irreplaceable. He lost his mother, not to death, but to his own greed and cruelty. That loss will follow him forever. I learned something too. I learned that it is never too late to choose yourself, never too late to demand respect, never too late to start over. I spent most of my life putting others first, sacrificing my own needs and dreams. In my final chapters, I finally learned to put myself first, and it saved me. If there is anyone watching this who feels trapped, who feels unappreciated, who feels like they are being taken advantage of by family, hear me. You deserve better. Your sacrifices matter. Your dignity matters. You matter. And it is never too late to protect yourself, to set boundaries, to walk away from people who treat you as less than you are. The screen that brought my son and his wife to their knees was not showing revenge. It was showing the truth, that the woman they threw away was stronger than they ever imagined. Now I want to hear from you. What would you have done in my situation? Would you have forgiven them and helped them save their house? Or would you have walked away like I did? Drop your answer in the comments below. And if this story touched your heart or made you think, please hit that like button, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe for more powerful true stories. Remember, respect is earned through actions, not demanded through blood. And everyone, no matter their age, deserves to be treated with dignity and love.